Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest Bob Burg, and he's here today to share with us his book, Adversaries into Allies, Master the Art of Ultimate Influence. I don't know about you, but relationships can be such a difficult thing, and this book is a game changer. Now, for those of you that are new to Bob, he is a highly sought-after speaker at company leadership and sales conferences on topics at the core of the Go-Giver books. A former television personality and top-producing salesperson, Bob has shared the platforms with some of today's top business leaders, broadcast professionals, coaches, athletes, and political leaders, including a former U.S. president. So let's welcome to the show, Bob Burg.
Well, thank you. It's always such a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, I always love talking with you, especially when we talk about your books, and I can't believe we haven't talked about this one yet. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you.
Adversaries into Allies.
Yeah, this is really kind of the culmination of everything I've spoken and written about over the past 30 years or so. So this is really the book I kind of felt, I know this sounds trite, but that I was put on earth to write.
Well, I found it to be extremely profound. There's so much information in here. And, of course, there's no way we're going to touch on all that today, but I'm so glad we're going to talk about this because this is like where people... This is kind of a make it or break it for people, being able to have these interpersonal relationships that aren't floundering but flourishing.
Yeah, I agree with you. It really is, so much about when you think of it, it comes down to people skills. That's really the difference maker between those who are successful, who attain a reasonable level of success, because even without people skills, you can attain a level of success. You can either be so good at a particular thing, have such an amazing talent in a certain area, be really great on what Wallace D. Wattles in his great 1910 book, The Science of Getting Rich, called the competitive plane, that you can get to a certain place without having people skills. But as Marshall Goldsmith in his masterful book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, talked about, basically, what got you here won't get you there. So it's not enough just to have that talent or that one skill set. The people who really attain those stratospheric levels, if you will, of success tend to be people who really are fantastic in the area of people skills, and that's really, in a sense, what this book is about.
Well, when you decided to write this book, was it, because it's got so much great information in here, and a lot of it is very actionable. People can, take the tools in this book and start making dramatic changes in the way they communicate in their relationships today. When you were writing this book, was it just this feeling like, gosh, I really have to get this information out there? Was there another reason behind it?
Well, I grew up with two wonderful parents. I was very blessed. And my dad, who was, in the local area where we lived, was, very much in the public eye. And I got to see him interact with people all the time. And never did I know anyone, or have I met anyone since, who just had such a way with people. So when he met people, they just loved him. And when he went back the second time, he, was already, known to everyone there, whether it was a restaurant or whether it was another business or whatever. And really, what he did, which I just always noticed and picked up on, was he just always took such a genuine and authentic interest in the other person. And he was able to really make other people feel genuinely good about themselves. And when we can do that, that's the essence when you think about people skills. Now, in Dad's case, it came very naturally to him. He just had a gift for that. With me, it was not a gift. It was something that I fortunately got to observe because it wasn't as natural with me. But what I saw him do helped so many people and just, made the world a better place wherever he went, that I just felt like that was my mission, to take that and carry that on. So really, this book to me is is really more a mission, my life's mission, if you will, to show people that there is a way to do this, and it can be learned. It can absolutely be learned. And, I like to do things in a way, as you talked about, actionable items. But you shouldn't have to learn, 7 this or 6 things to notice or 5. Now, all those, by the way, those kind of teachings and books are all great. They're wonderful. But most people won't take the time to actually learn all the things that you have to kind of know in order to be able to, to master that kind of stuff. I wanted to make it so it's very easy for people, so that once they read it, once they're exposed to the idea, they can actually just take it and run with it and utilize it the very next time they have a similar situation.
Well, and isn't that the truth? I think people just get overwhelmed. If there's like too many steps or too many things
right.
to consider,
right.
It's kind of like, gosh, okay, what am I doing now? Especially because it's kind of uncharted territory. I mean, I'm like you. I've had to learn interpersonal communications. I think most people have, but to be raised by a couple of people who are so equipped with the skill set, it kind of gave you a jump start into what I think a lot of people are craving to have.
I agree. I was very, very fortunate, and I think it is something that people, and when I get the feedback from people who have either taken some of my trainings or read the book or however they may have heard about it, and they write me back, they email me and talk about how, they were able to attain satisfaction when dealing with this person or company that they didn't, before they didn't think they would have had a chance to do, and that everyone came away, better off from the transaction. Or they were able to save money on this, or they were able to, it's such a great feeling. And, you teach these kinds of things, and you're such a great teacher and coach, so you know what it's like when you receive that kind of feedback, and there's really nothing like it.
Yeah, I learned that from you. Well, part of it.
That's very kind. I think you were doing this a long time before we ever met, but thank you. That's very kind.
Well, it is the truth, though, because we're, in this kind of area, there's constant room for growth and improvement. And I think your book, regardless how good you are in interpersonal communications, Adversaries into Allies, is hands down, I think, the best book of the year. So
wow. Thank you. What an amazing compliment.
Yeah, well, and so why don't we start from the basics for our listeners here? Because we hear influence all the time. Like, influence this, and you have to be an influencer. What does that really mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of become a word that's taken on a lot of different meanings and definitions, and almost sort of lost a little bit of its impact. Almost lost a little bit of its influence because of the way it's overused. And so yes, I think it's always important to begin with a definition, just so that we're all on the same track and talking about the same thing. I think influence itself goes a couple levels. On a very, very basic level, we can define influence as simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. By definition, Marianne, that's influence. Now, that's its definition, but I would say that that's not its substance, or that's not its essence, if you will. The essence of influence is pull as opposed to push. Most of us have heard the expression, the question, how far can you push a rope? And we know the answer is not very far, at least not very fast or very effectively, which is why great influencers don't push. You never hear someone say, wow, that David or that Sonia, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people. Right? She sure is pushy. Wow, what a leader, what an influencer. No, they'd say she's influential. She has a lot of pull with people. That is what influence is. Influence is pull. It's attraction. Great influencers attract people first to themselves, and then, and only then, to their idea. And they do this, again, not through pushing their ideas on others, through pushing their will on others, through being push-y, but through its very opposite, which is pull.
Mm-hmm. And being able, well, and that makes perfect sense, because when you look at influence, you look at something that's attracting people.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I want to be around people who have influence because they have that certain trait that we're looking to develop.
Exactly. And then, if we say, so okay, Bob, I get it, influence is pull. So how do you pull, right? How do you pull someone to you and to your idea? And I think that really, in a sense, goes back to the influencer understanding what I believe, Marianne, was Dale Carnegie's underlying premise in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I once asked a Dale Carnegie instructor if he agreed with me, and he did. And to me, I saw that the underlying premise of the entire book in one sentence, which did a lot to help me. And it was where Dale Carnegie wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. And I think that's so important for us to understand. I often say when I speak at, and I think you and I have talked about this before, when I speak to a sales audience, I'll often say, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. They're not going to buy from you because you need the money. They're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you only because they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And so, again, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So the great influencer, what we would call the genuine influencer, they ask themselves questions to make sure that they're focused in the right direction, which is the other person. So they'll ask themselves questions such as, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals? How does it align with their wants, their needs, their desires? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? What problems am I helping them to solve? What am I helping them to achieve that they have expressed a desire for? And I think when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully and intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another human being into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment as opposed to trying to depend on some type of compliance, which is, force or manipulation or intimidation or something which, at best is unsustainable. At worst, just is totally ineffective because the person's going to sabotage the process even if they have to do what we want because of some positional type of authority we might have.
Yeah. I mean, no one likes working with a tyrant, regardless if it's somebody that they're doing business with or, feeling like they're being forced into any kind of position. Even subconsciously, they may try to make the whole thing fall apart.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. In your book, you talk about ultimate influence as one of the top traits for overall success, and you explain about that in your book.
Yeah, well, so we talked the definition of influence, which was very basic, and then if we say, okay, so what is ultimate influence or genuine influence? Well, I would define that as simply the ability to get the results you want when dealing with others while making them feel genuinely good about themselves, about you, and about the situation. So when you can do that, that's ultimate influence.
The thing is you talk about perception and how important all that is throughout this entire process. And, it's interesting because I think a lot of us, we kind of walk through the world not really realizing that other people have a different set of viewpoints that they're viewing from.
Oh, absolutely. That is one of the killers of influence. In every way. It's one of the killers in negotiation. It's one of the killers in sales. It's one of the killers in any type of relationship you may have with anyone. It's thinking that the other person is viewing the world from the same set of beliefs as we are, because they're probably not. That's actually principle number 2 is, understand the clash of belief systems. Because what is a belief? Well, a belief is a subjective truth. That's important. A belief is a subjective truth. It's the truth as you or as I understand the truth to be, which doesn't mean it's the truth. It means it's our truth. And now sometimes our truth and the truth are the same, but many times it's not. Far more often than we think, the truth and our truth are not the same thing. Because we see the world, you've heard it said before, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. Well, that's absolutely true. We see it actually through our own belief system. Our belief system is a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, everything we touch, taste, see, hear, smell. But it's pretty much etched in stone by the time we're little more than toddlers. So most of us, we grow up with having a certain view of the world, a set of beliefs that were handed to us, basically, right? We didn't consciously take these in. We were babies. We were too young. And we grow up living our lives through what I call an unconscious operating system, thinking that we're making proactive choices, when really we're simply making choices from within a premise or a matrix, if you will, if you remember the movie. And then what happens also is on top of that is not only are we seeing the world unconsciously through a certain set of pre-programmed beliefs, but so is everyone else, everyone we deal with. Now, let's add on top of that as human beings, and you brought this up beautifully earlier, we tend to think that the other person sees the world the same basically as we do, which is very intuitive. It makes sense. How could it be anything else? It's all we know. But we also know that's not really true. This is why you often hear people say things like, oh, everybody likes that. Or, oh, no one would want that. Or, if you've ever heard someone say, or if you've said, I know I've said this all too often, oh, I would never treat anyone that way, right? Well, no, we wouldn't, because it's not congruent with our beliefs. But for other people, it's totally congruent with their beliefs. So the key, Marianne, is not that necessarily that we understand their belief system. They probably don't understand their belief system. The key is that we understand the clash of belief systems. We understand that their way of seeing the world is probably a lot different from, or at least significantly different from the way we see the world. And when we do that, we're then in a position to work within a context where we can go deeper into understanding their thought processes by asking questions, by listening, and so forth, and being able to, to help come to a win-win conclusion.
And really to see it from another person's point of view, because, we really don't know what those belief systems are.
Right.
There's so many of them out there. It's all based on how they were raised and things that they've developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Which, has me kind of wondering, because you talk about this in your book, about how adversaries, there are partners in our growth and our success. What do you mean by that?
Well, because if we approach it the right way, they're helping us to grow, right? Our adversaries are actually helping us to grow. If everybody just thought as we thought and believed as we believed, things would be as they are. It would be, wonderful to a certain point, I guess, but we certainly wouldn't be able to grow. When we have someone who is difficult to deal with, we have got to know how to effectively deal with that person. And once we do that, we've just stepped up our level of knowledge, of wisdom, of consciousness in every way. Not that doesn't mean it's fun. Right? Obviously, if somebody's difficult to deal with, or that customer service person's not doing what they should do, or that person in our company in that other silo who's not providing us with the information we need, or that customer who's hard to get in to see, or what have you. Hey, it's not fun. It's not supposed to be fun, I don't think. But when we can see it as an opportunity for growth, we're certainly able to frame it in a way that serves us a lot better. Also, taking this to an even deeper level, I use the example in there of Sadaharu Oh, who's the Japanese professional baseball league player, Hall of Famer, who is the the all-time home run champion, 865 career home runs. And what he said is that he did not see the opposing pitcher as his adversary, but rather as his partner in hitting home runs. Wow. That's totally going from the competitive to the creative plane. You're seeing that. So can you do the same thing? Can you see this person who is kind of difficult to deal with? Can you actually see them as your partner in growth? And that's a big thing.
That is a big thing, because it takes you really have to kind of step back from how you may be feeling, which is something I want to get into a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're feeling about all that.
Yeah. And, in the case of Sadaharu, when I've told that story, people have said, yeah, but I'm sure the other pitcher didn't see himself as a partner in Sadaharu hitting home runs. And my answer would be, absolutely, you're right. The pitcher didn't. But just like the person who you're finding difficult to deal with, they probably don't see themselves as a partner in your growth. They're not thinking that deeply, but you are. And that's what counts. As long as you're thinking of that person as a partner in your growth, you can approach that situation from a totally different viewpoint.
And they may not even be in the place where they can even, think about, how to participate in a discussion.
Oh, sure. You're exactly right. Exactly.
Their belief systems. It's all about, it could be like, I've got a kid home. That's homesick. I've got business to run. I've got all these things to do. So they're not even focused on those kind of things.
Yeah, most people are not conscious of this, and that's one of the things in the book that I tried to bring about, especially in terms of belief systems. That when we talk about an unconscious operating system, well, even when we understand this, it's still difficult to act consciously. Much of the time, it's a constant work in process. I can't tell you how often I catch myself being unconscious, right? And so then that next step is to be conscious of being unconscious, right? And it's something you keep working on. Now, the Dalai Lama might totally have mastered this. Maybe a few others, Michael Singer, and some of the others, but I haven't. This is something I continually work on, but I'll say this. I'm much better at it than I used to be because it's something I focus on constantly, and we don't have to be perfect. We just need to continue to improve.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Bob Burg in regards to his book, Adversaries into Allies, Master the Art of Ultimate Influence. Again, if you'd like to connect with Bob and learn a little bit more about him, you can at burg.com. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Bob Burg, and he's sharing with us his book, Adversaries into Allies, Master the Art of Ultimate Influence.
Now, before we went for break, we were talking about how your parents have really, they excel in this area, and to have that kind of education from a young age. When we talk about people that maybe have come from situations that don't provide them, adequate training in regards to the interpersonal skills, maybe their parents just didn't have the skill set themselves.
Sure.
So your book really provides a lot of information on where people can start.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because what you're saying is right on point. Remember, their belief system would be one in which it's, every relationship is a battle. I think the person who brought this up probably better than anyone ever was Dr. Maxwell Maltz in his 1960s classic Psycho-Cybernetics, when really the whole premise of the book was that the Psycho-Cybernetics simply means mind-machine. And that we basically see the world in a certain way, again, what I would call belief systems, and we see the truths, and these, again, they're subjective truths. So if someone, why is it that people, generation after generation in a family, they have, abusive relationships, let's say, and it's so sad, but if someone grows up as the child within an abusive relationship, it's not that they on any level think that that's a good thing, but it's what they see as the truth. They see this as the way life is. And that's why, and as Dr. Maltz would explain, that when they meet someone and they're in a relationship where it's just a wonderful, loving, kind relationship, they may feel good about that momentarily, but that's not their truth of the way the world works, and that's why they will unconsciously do things to sabotage that. And they'll bring themselves just like one of those, missiles that course corrects during flight until it hits the actual target. If their target or the way they see the world is that a relationship is an unhealthy, argumentative, even abusive relationship, they're going to keep sabotaging everything else and course correcting until they get that way. Well, the only way to ever get out of that pattern is to become consciously aware of it and understand what it really is. And only then are you in a position to take the steps to work on yourself and readjust your beliefs, which, of course, he helps you do so well in his book.
Well, and what's I applaud you, because, you bring that up in your book, and you talk in a great deal about it, which I feel is very important, because coming to that realization that we have belief systems that are different than other people, and some that may need to be questioned, I think is, it's like an aha moment for a lot of our readers and our listeners that are just kind of going, gosh, okay, I need to shift the relationships I have now. Maybe I have conflict at home or at work or everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, in a sense, it's where it begins.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so, in your book, you share this great example of coming into Canada for a speaking event.
Right.
And I would love for you to share a little bit about that for our listeners, because, you look at something, I've known you for a little while, Bob, and you're a very likable guy. Everyone that meets you likes you, and you present very well. So it's challenging to read a story where someone, maybe isn't quite feeling the same way that I'd say 99% of the populace does when they meet you.
Well, thank you. This happened actually many years ago, and of course I've spoken in Canada many times, and I adore my Canadian friends, but you know what? When it comes to the border, they're kind of like the U.S. border people. They're bureaucrats and people who have their own kind of ways of doing things, and I tend to find that 99% of them, both on the Canadian and American side, are a pleasure to deal with, and then there's that 1% that sometimes isn't. And what happened is that on that particular night, I arrived very, very late into the Toronto airport, and I had a program the next morning for a financial services convention conference where I was speaking, and so I arrived very late. My ride I knew was waiting outside. Of course, you go through immigration when you go in. So everything was going smoothly, and I was at the very last stop and the last person. And as I approached her, I smiled as always, and she smiled, very lovely smile, and I gave her my the information I had filled out, and she asked me why I was coming in. I said to speak at a conference, and she goes, "Oh, what kind of conference?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's for a company of financial advisors." She goes, and she started asking me kind of, more questions about them, and she was asking kind of more questions than were necessary. Again, I've spoken enough to know what is necessary to comply with with what's needed. But it was okay. My feeling is I'm a guest in another person's country. I need to comply with what they're asking me to do. So, but then she said, "So, would you consider yourself a speaker?" And I said, "Well, yes, I would." And she goes, "Well, I see a problem with this." And I said, "Well, why?" And she goes, "Well, are you receiving for this an honorarium or a speaking fee?" And the difference would be that an honorarium is something very small and a speaking fee is something big. And I knew that had I said honorarium, that's the answer she wanted. But I didn't lie for a couple of reasons. First, it's just not good to lie, and unless you're protecting your life or your family's life or something, or if there's a real compelling reason for it, there's a certain time and place for everything. But that wasn't really the time. But also, had I lied and said honorarium, she probably would have detained me to check, and had she found out what I was really receiving and that I had lied to her, she could have sent me right back on the next plane back to Florida. So that wouldn't have been good either. So I just said, "Well, I'm receiving a fee." And she goes, "Well, there's a big problem with that because," and she really went into a long thing. Now, the entire time, I knew that was not the issue because, again, I've spoken enough in Canada to understand what's needed and so forth. There was something else really going on. And so at this point, what I needed to do was really be sure that I followed my own teaching in terms of how to handle the situation. And the first part is which is step number one, and that is to master my own emotions, control my own emotions, not let myself become upset based on what she was doing, because when we do that, that's sort of what the person wants. And so had I started to yell and scream and get demanding and "I can't believe you're doing blah blah blah," well, that would have now been her self-fulfilling prophecy, probably, right, of what she was expecting. And so I needed to control myself and not panic and just kind of go with it and wait things out a little bit. The next part is understand the clash of belief systems. She's obviously coming from a different belief than I am as far as what is appropriate. Now, I didn't know what it was yet, but I was going to have to listen and discover that. The next part would also be, maybe understanding that ego has something to do with it. Because, again, I knew that the problem wasn't what she was saying it was. So there was something else going on. then, number 4 is to set the frame. A frame is the foundation from which everything else evolves. Now, she had set a frame of conflict, obviously. So what you need to do when someone else has already set the frame is you need to reset the frame. So had I bought into her frame and made this an argument between the two of us, there's no way I could possibly win. It just wasn't going to happen. She had the positional authority in this case. So I needed to reset the frame, and I did that by continuing to be exceedingly polite and helpful and solicitous and everything I needed to be. And number 5 is to communicate with tact and empathy. My dad, who I referred to earlier, my dad has always defined tact as the language of strength. And this is, in a sense, it's being able to communicate through your words, or through what you say, through how you say it, communicate an idea that someone may not agree with, but communicate this in such a way that they're not defensive toward you or resistant to your ideas, but rather they're open to you and accepting of your ideas. Empathy, which is really kind of more of a heart-to-heart connection, it's the putting yourself in the position of attempting to understand that person's feeling. So you may not understand exactly how they feel or what they feel, but you understand they're feeling something that's distressful to them, and you're there to help them, work within that toward a good solution. So I needed to use all of those. And so as I'm continuing the conversation with her, and then she brought another person into it, and another one of her associates. And then finally in the conversation, she said what I understood was the key. She said, "Do you happen to know," and she named a speaker, an American speaker who is a very, very big name, who doesn't look like me, but has some similar features, but, not enough to confuse, but a popular American speaker. And I said, I know of him, sure. And she said, well, he was here a few months ago, and he was the rudest, nastiest person that you have ever, blah, 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 blah. And she went, well, I realized that was it. This was the entire issue. This was all based on emotion. It was based on, her ego had been upset by this person. I guess he was really nasty to her. And, of course, I don't blame her for being upset. This was the frame. This was everything. So at that point, I understood what it really was, that it was about him. It was the problem that she had with him, which was now my problem. And it was my problem. Whether it should be or not isn't the point. We need to deal in truths, not in what we wish would be. So what I said, and of course I couldn't agree with her about the other person because that would be participating in gossip. I had no right to do that. But what I did say, I think I made a joke about myself or something, and then I said something, well, I said something, I'm sorry you had to experience that. But I just, I do appreciate you helping me through this, and just, please know that I'm a guest. I realize I'm a guest in your country, and I'm happy to do whatever it is I need to comply with your rules. And boom, right there, it was a total turnaround. And she just said, well, Mr. Burg, you're so much nicer than that person, and I really shouldn't have, blah, 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 whatever. And then that was it. That was it. Now, here's the interesting thing. I totally believe that she is a very nice person. I mean, she seemed like a lovely person when I first, when our eyes met, and she just did. But sometimes, because we're human beings, when we have a situation with one person that really upsets us on a very deep emotional level that she obviously carried with her for a while, it can kind of turn us into being someone that we probably aren't. Now, that's not an excuse for the way she acted. She shouldn't have done what she did, but it explains it, and we can understand it, and we can grow from it, and we can, understand that that's part of working effectively as an influencer.
Well, I think it provides great insight to how other people feel. Mm-hmm. I'm sure she walked away from that experience with you feeling like, she had been kind of just appreciated and kind of renewed in some way, regardless if, a lot of times these things happen and we never find out about them.
Exactly.
Just kind of like how she felt. Well, it's interesting because you did touch on the emotion aspect of it. And I know we're kind of hopping around a little bit here because, I mean, you've got
That's okay.
several principles in the book, but we're not going to cover them all because, people do want to go pick up their own copy of Adversaries into Allies. But, the emotional aspect is so huge. When we talk about being in control of your emotions, I mean, I think that's a place where sometimes people, they get their button pushed and they're like, it's game on now, instead of really being involved in the conversation in a deeper way.
Oh, it begins there. I mean, it begins with consciousness of it, but it starts out with the emotions. The sages of old asked, who is mighty, and answered, that person who can control their own emotions and make of an enemy or of a potential enemy a friend. And you think of it, it's only when we're in control of ourselves, when we're in control of our emotions, that we're even in a position to be able to take a potentially negative situation or person, as we just discussed, and turn it into a win for everyone involved. And yet, how often, as you said, do we as human beings allow someone based on what they said or they did to push our emotional hut buttons, and we cause ourselves to become upset or frustrated or victim-y or angry, right? And we say or do something that we know is so counterproductive to accomplishing what we want. And that, if we ask ourselves the question, well, if we know better, why do we do that? And the answer, I believe, is because we're human beings. And as human beings, we are emotional creatures. We'd like to think we're logical, and of course to a certain extent we are, but we're emotion-driven. And we make major decisions based on emotion. We back up those decisions with logic. We rationalize, right, which is really nothing more than that we tell ourselves rational lies. And we do this to, justify saying or doing that which we know we shouldn't have done, or taking an action that we know is really not in our best, most logical interest. And so we need to really be aware of our emotions and be in charge of them. And what we're not saying is that you should deny your emotions or forego your emotions. First, it would not make sense to do so. It's contrary to human nature. We couldn't do it. But also, it's not necessary. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. They make life worthwhile. They bring us joy. They bring us pleasure. But so no, by all means, we want you to have your emotions. It's just that you need to be in control of your emotions as opposed to your emotions being in control of you. Or as one of my great friends, the leadership authority, Don DeScumaci, so beautifully puts it, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car. You need to be at the wheel, right? Your emotions need to be safely seatbelt fastened in the passenger seat. Take them with you. Our emotions have wisdom to share, but it's our logical self that needs to be the driver if we want to create the environment where the decisions we're making are generally the best ones.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, otherwise it's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
It's kind of going along on the big roller coaster right there. Well, it's interesting because when people think about Adversaries into Allies, when they think about your book, it can be used more than just interpersonal connections with people at home and people we come across in contact. I mean, it really is a great book to use in business, with
Thank you.
With clients, with other people we work with, because sometimes it's life is difficult and navigating all that can be a little challenging.
Yeah, I think like any principle, it works across the board if it's a true principle, And so we like to think that this will work in terms of success in the various areas that we think of success being, whether it's financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, that these principles can hopefully apply across the board.
Well, they do without a doubt. And again, I mean, there's so much. It's just a book that's filled with a vast amount of knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I once I picked it up, I was just going through it, and I've been rereading it because there are points that are like, gosh, I really need to get this. And what's interesting, in your book you talk about, and I think this is a good thing to discuss, you talk about, just being able to say no with grace and having it be effective. And I think a lot of times people have real difficulty in being able to do that without being aggressive.
Right. Well, again, it's a human thing because we really, I don't think we want to disappoint people, especially if we're asked to do something that's not not an out of line, not an inappropriate request, but something a lot of times we're asked to do something, it means somebody thought highly enough of us to ask. We want to please others. Again, that's just a human thing. Now, that's fine, as long as it doesn't take away from your own happiness or peace of mind and so forth. I'm not a big believer in being a martyr or being self-sacrificial unless there's a real good reason for it, such as someone's life or something that, is very, but by and large, my feeling is if you don't want to do something, then you should be able to say no, but say no in such a way that it really genuinely makes the other person feel good about themselves, feel honored and respected while it protects your boundaries. And I've heard various, ways of saying no. And again, while I never want to diss any other type of teaching, and everything will work at times, I think the ways that it's often taught, I think, are counterproductive to doing it in what I would consider the right way. Which again doesn't mean I'm right, but the way that I would believe. Because I've heard people say, well, no is a complete sentence, and that seems to be the new kind of thing. People, no is a complete sentence, and I've seen people hear that and nod their heads in empowerment. Oh yeah, next time someone asks me to do something, I'm just going to say no. And really that sounds good in theory, and I understand the idea. The idea is you shouldn't feel compelled to do something you don't want to do. I agree with that, absolutely. But there's a big difference in that and in the way that you relay it to someone. So, if we take the generic example of someone asking you to serve on a committee and you just don't want to do it for whatever reason, you don't want to. Well, if they ask, are you really just going to say no? I mean, is that really a complete sentence? I don't believe it is. First, it's rude, it's impolite. Secondly, you're turning maybe an ally into an adversary doing it that way, and that person's probably never going to come back and ask you to do anything again, and you may want to keep the door open to doing future things with that person. It's just this particular thing you don't want to do. So I don't think that no is a complete sentence. I don't think no is a complete sentence when it comes to saying no correctly, appropriately. Another way people are sometimes taught is to kind of fib a little bit. Well, I would, but I don't have the time. This is troublesome for a couple of reasons. One is because, it never feels good to fib. And you know that even if and it isn't that you don't have the time. As human beings, we don't have the time. We make the time to do that which we want to do. What it really means, what you're really saying is, I don't value doing this as much as I value not doing this. Again, for whatever reason it might be, and that's true. And so on one hand, you kind of don't feel good about yourself that you're not really being honest. But also, you've set yourself up when you say, I would, but I don't have the time. You're setting yourself up for that person who's heard this quite a bit and probably has a compelling reason why time will not be an issue for you. And when they do, now you're in a bad position. Now you've got to either say, well, okay, let me come clean. It's not that I don't have the time. I just don't want to do it, which, again, is going to make them a little bit mad, and you're not going to feel good. Or in order to save face, you've got to, okay, in that case, I'll do it. You've got to take the gig that you don't want to take, and that's not good. And it's the same if you said, well, I don't have the time right now. Well, that person's going to come back and say, oh, that's okay. We're going to be doing this 6 months from now. Can you commit to doing it then? So again, by doing this, you're hurting yourself. So let me suggest a very easy way to do this, that if you'll just practice it a couple of times, it will really set you free. And you can be both honest and kind and genuine and tactful and honor the other person. So again, let's say the person asks you to serve on this committee. You simply say, "Thank you so much for asking. While it's not something I'd like to do, please know how honored I am to be asked." And that's it. That's it. And yeah, you can say the words a little bit different depending upon your own style. It might be, "Oh, thank you so much. While it's not something I choose to pursue, or not something I choose to do, please know how grateful I am, or how honored and grateful I am to be asked." However you want to say it's fine. But that basic idea. What you're doing is, again, you're thanking them, you're honoring them, you're letting them know how honored you are just to be thought of, to be asked. But you're also letting them know it's not something that you're choosing to do, but you have not given them something to hold on to that they can overcome and answer and do that. And so again, my way of doing it would be, "Thank you so much for asking. While it's not something I'd like to do, please know how honored I am to be asked." And 99% of the time, that's it. They'll thank you for the way you did it. You can do this through email, on the phone, in person, doesn't matter. Now, if they're the type who, they generally don't take a first no as an answer, and there'll be those types, or you may have trained people that you can be, kind of bullied or coerced, and you need to kind of retrain. If they say, "Oh, come on, but we really need you, blah, blah, blah," whatever, you simply listen. You don't interrupt them. You just listen with a very calm, serene look, no defensiveness. And once they finish, you just simply say, "Oh, I'd rather not, but I so appreciate the offer. Thank you." Boom.
How graceful is that? I mean, there's not many people that can, really get angry at that kind of a no.
Right, exactly. I can't tell you how often I've had people thank me, and I've had others who've reported back to me, how people have actually thanked them and told them, "Wow, they're going to say the same thing to people," after being told no like that. So yeah, it absolutely works, and it does so in a way that's very kind.
Mhm. It kind of works for them. Well, and gosh, I mean, I obviously have more questions than we have time for, but that's usually how it goes when we talk, especially about your books.
Well,
and goodness, Bob, what are some of the final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I think in a sense it's, first it's just being willing to apply the information, not worrying about being perfect with it, but understanding that once you start to, again, not even master it, but just become proficient at it, suddenly you have a lot more self-confidence. You become even better liked, more respect, highly trusted, far more influential in your world. And much of it just has to do by remembering to move from an I focus or me focus to what we call an other focus, where you understand that, the best influencers know that it's not about them. It's about that person they want to influence, whose lives they want to touch.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes such a difference. I mean, your book, Adversaries into Allies, is a great way for people to springboard into creating right relationships with those around them. And, and before we go, Bob, where can people connect with you and be part of your community? I know you do all these great, you do Facebook Lives, you do all these great things that people can, participate in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just probably the best place is thegogiver.com, without the hyphen, thegogiver.com. And if people scroll down the page, they'll see all sorts of goodies they can plug into if they'd like.
And connect with you there. Well, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
My pleasure. I always love talking with you. It's always a joy for me. We don't do it enough, and it's just you're so great at what you do, and you make such a difference in so many people's lives, including my own. So keep up the great work, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you, Bob. It is always such a pleasure and a treat to spend time with you and, of course, to talk about your life-changing books. I'm so glad that we got to talk about Adversaries into Allies. It's one of the books I've been really wanting to talk with you about, and what a life-changing book that is. Again, if you'd like to connect with Bob, you can at his website, burg.com, and that's spelled BURG.com. He'll have information there in regards to all the other books he's written. Highly suggest picking them all up. They've been a game changer for me, and I'm sure that you'll find value in them as well. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.